Assalamu alaikum everyone. Really excited again tonight. We've got Dr. Hodan Osman here, who came all the way from China. And also we've got Sabrina, who's my friend. And also she's a PhD student at South University. I'm gonna introduce Dr. Hodan Osman. So inshallah tonight we are going to show a documentary that sets in the second city that has the largest African community in China. Hodan is a lot of amazing things. I couldn't really memorize it, so I'm going to read it to you so that you know a bit about her. Hodan Abdi is the Vice Director of the Center for African Film and TV Studies, a researcher and a lecturer at the Institute of African Studies at the Zhangzhou, a global leading think tank located in China. She's a PhD graduate in communications studies. Her research focuses on cross-cultural communications amongst African diaspora communities. She's the author of several academic papers in leading journals, including the Asian Journal of Comparative Politics, Journal of Contemporary Cinema, Contemporary Communications, and China Media Research. I'm gonna apologize to Sabrina for breaking down her language. She's a PhD student at SOAS, and she's focusing on Somali women poets and also Somali women's poetry in general. She's been studying people like Asha Lul and Farah and a lot of people, and I'm really glad they're here. So I'm gonna welcome Dr. Hodan.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm Hodan Osman, and as she has introduced, I am not any of those labels. I'm actually a student of life, and we continue to learn every day. And the journey of making this film was actually a journey of learning and discovery. And that is what brought me here today, and that is what brought me to bring this film here today to share it with our Somali community here in the UK. To give you a short introduction to this film and why we filmed it and tell you a little bit about it. The film is titled What's on Feizhou Lai. What's on Feizhou Lai actually means I come from Africa. And it has another English name that is called Africans in Yiwu, or the African community in the city of Yiwu. Yiwu is a very special place in China. It's a tiny city, compared to Chinese cities. It's about 1,000 square kilometers big. But it hosts the largest market for small commodities. What does that mean? It means if you want a hairpin, you'll go to Yiwu. If you want a zipper, for example, or the tiny parts of a zipper, you'll go to Yiwu. If you want a shoelace, you'll go to Yiwu. So it's got the largest market for selling all of these small little things, and everybody from all around the world goes there. But a few hundred years ago, this place was so barren, people were literally starving to death. And the only way for them to survive was through conducting business. So we have a proverb in China, or in Yiwu, that's called 鸡毛换糖. That means exchanging chicken feathers for sugar. So this place, they used to grow sugarcane, and they used to make brown sugar from it. And in order for them to survive, they used to sell this brown sugar and exchange it, not for money, but for chicken feathers. And what do they do with these chicken feathers? They make, what do you call it?
鸡毛掸子.
Oh,
yeah.
鸡毛掸子怎么说?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
So
it's like a sweep to sweep away dust. They used to make dusters with these, and this is their entrepreneurial spirit, how it started a few hundred years ago, and right now it continues till today. And so the city not only attracted different Chinese people from different cities and different regions to come to this place and turned it into the big mobile city that it is today, but it also attracted a huge African community. And amongst that African community are a lot of Somali people who came there with literally nothing. And today, they are very reputed businessmen, they are very reputed people who have contributed to not just to that society, but to also to their own communities. This documentary, or this film that I brought today, is only a tiny part, a tiny excerpt of the big film. The film in total is 6 episodes long. It's 3 hours. But today I've chosen a few stories to bring and to show here. The way that we filmed this film is actually quite different than the usual filmmaking styles or documentary filmmaking. We used an ethnographic research kind of methodology to make this film. So we followed the lives of over 20 different individuals from different African countries for the period of a year and a half. And through that year and a half, we didn't have a script. We just followed their lives. We did interviews and we followed them. And after a year and a half, we started writing the script and cutting the film. So this film basically is based on the real lives and real stories that are self-told, self-narrated by these individuals. And today I've only brought 6 stories of different individuals, and inshallah I hope you like it. So the first story is actually my own. So I'm not only directing the film or writing the script, I'm also part of it. And it's also something rare and new in documentary filmmaking. So inshallah, I hope you guys will enjoy it. It's in Chinese, but it's got English subtitles. And we'll be opening the floor for questions after the film is screened, inshallah. So thank you very much.
我叫Hodan，来自 Somali。2005年9月来到中国，修习本科、硕士以及博士。我们的先知穆罕默德说过，你要追求知识的源泉，你可以到中国。
欢迎来到杭州，我们现在是在市中心，我在浙江大学读传播学博士。今天刚好是我毕业的日子。他们问我来自哪里，我会说来自黑龙江。黑，我皮肤黑呀；龙，我有龙的精神。江，那么我喜欢山水，那我就是来自黑龙江。会说东北话吗？我就会说你哪嘎子的？玉泉山色，枝江月轮，溪溪曲水，架树凡尘。中江南句玉秀，善格致，善格致而纯真善要停一下，中要停一下，逛要停一下。待会儿40分钟之后，我要作为毕业生代表，在毕业典礼上，做演讲，把写的东西开会读顺一点，希望不要忘词儿啊什么的。上面还贴着叫他。很衬肤色啊。你看，满脸都是汗。我叫Hodan，今天很荣幸能够站在这里。我对我自己的汉语水平非常的自豪，非常的自信。在今天呢，决定用中文。
我10岁的时候跟自己做了个约定，到了25岁手上一定要有一个硕士学位，到了28岁必须是个博士。
我觉得全世界的女博士都非常的痛苦，真的当一个女博士非常的不简单。在他们知道我是个女博士之前，跟他们知道我是个女博士之后，如何跟我交流都会有很大不一样。之前比如说要讨论任何问题啊，人家愿意听你的，但是一旦知道你是个女博士，他们就你不可以这样子偷偷说到。
Assalamualaikum. Maka aku Sabrina and of Somalika and Balanea, and that's it. So Mahasanit To start, like before we start, I have to say, Hodan's Chinese is perfect, and all the guys in the film earlier is just perfect. I hope one day I can, like, my Somali could be as good as yours.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, first thing I want to say is, like, thank you for bringing us a good film, and as a Chinese, I feel really, really touched, like speaking Mandarin with you in Somali Week Festival and watching a film like in Mandarin. Like, it is so beautiful, and to see so many Chinese elements in the film, and we are showing it in front of all the Somali audience is just perfect. So I have seen that you've talked about themes such as transnational marriage in China, studying in China, doing business in China, or like pursuing a dream in China. Like, how did you decide like the themes, and why did you choose these peoples?
All right, thank you very much, Sabrina. And I must admit, your Somali is much better than mine.
No,
Yeah?
no.
I'm guessing if you're with Professor Orwin, in a couple of years, you'll be really exceeding my Somali capabilities. So the documentary film, actually, the way we came up to filming it is kind of different. We're not filmmakers by profession. By profession, me and my co-director, Zhang Yong, we are researchers in a research institute. It's called the Institute for African Studies. And I research communication studies, and I look at diaspora communities and their media consumption, and how their identity construction comes into it with regard to what media they consume. And my friend, or my colleague and co-director, Zhang Yong, researches African cinema. And one day he approached me, that was actually at a conference before I graduated from my PhD, and he had this idea of making a documentary film about the lives of the African community in China. The reason for that was mostly right now the films that we see in media, or the media reports that we often find speaking about the lives of the African community in China are almost always controversial. They always speak about the negativities, about people being kicked out of the country, about people being refused visas or other racial issues. But nobody speaks about the stories, the struggles, and their ways to adaptation, and also the good things that happen to a lot of the African community that come to China. So a lot of them do come with nothing, and they end up, building very reputable lives. So it was actually more of an ethnographic research. So we embarked on this research and looking at the African community in the city of Yiwu, what characteristics make them different than the general African community in China or in other cities such as Guangzhou. And we really found that it was a completely different kind of community than that we find in Guangzhou, and we wanted them to voice their own stories. So you see in the film, we're just following them throughout stages throughout 1.5 years. And after following them for that long and just going through with them, experiencing a lot of things with them, then we wrote the script and we edited it. So you see that each character is just telling their own story because I'm sitting there and talking to them. So it's just a conversation. We're just having conversations, and then through those conversations, they're telling their own stories, and we've then weave that into a film, a montage of over 20 different characters telling their own stories.
So there are in total 20...
Actually 24.
24 sites. Can you describe
Yeah.
how many women, how many men, where do they come from?
Okay. So the film is basically divided into 6 episodes. Each episode is half an hour long.
Yeah.
And each episode has 3 stories. So in the end, the documentary series that we have only features 18 characters. However, there's an international version. This version is for the Chinese market. But there's an international version that's going to have subtitles in it that version would have about 24 different characters, and they're from, let's say, about a dozen countries, 12 countries, and the percentage of women, to be honest, is very low. There's only about 5 women,
Yeah, I see.
only about 5 female stories, and the rest of the stories are male.
I am quite interested in the Yusuf's story because transnational, especially for a Chinese woman to marry a foreign person, is quite an issue in China. Like, do you have an opinion on that?
So, China has had a continuous culture of about 5,000 years, and they're very, very protective of their own cultures, and they really don't like to lose that. So in a sense, families don't really like to let their daughters or sons marry from different countries. Now, let alone marrying somebody from a different skin color or a different religion or a different culture. That would mean that the child would lose their own original culture. So parents are usually afraid of these things. And in Yusuf's story, Yusuf actually, I've known him for about 8 years now. He used to study in my university, and he met Jami, and they were together for about 6 years. And then they decided to get married. However, Yusuf actually comes from Dar es Salaam. He's from the city. He's a city boy. But Jami comes from a village, a very small village in Zhejiang province. And when they approached the family almost, like she said, they almost exploded. The mother, the first thing that she said, "He is so black. He is so ugly. Why would you marry him? Couldn't you find anybody else?" And, you know, Yusuf did a very amazing thing that really inspired me. And when I wanted to make this film, I remembered him first. It's because he didn't choose to go against the family or fight them or say, "We're going to get married no matter what. Let's just forget about what the family thinks." No, he said, "I'll give them time to get to know me, and then we will see." So throughout that year, when they decided to get married and until they got married, it was about a year gap. He used to go to that village all the time. And like you saw, he used to help the grandfather. The grandfather doesn't even speak Mandarin. He only speaks the local dialect, which is different from Mandarin. So there's no communication, right? But he's helping him. He used to help him with the farming. He used to help him with all of the work that he's doing around the house. And at the same time, he would cook. He would treat the parents in a very kind way. And in the end, I was very touched by something that Jiaming's mother said. She said, "After a year of watching Yusuf, I found that he would be better for my daughter than 100 Chinese men." And in the end, she agreed to let them get married. And actually, this wedding that you saw, it was the parents who threw the wedding. They threw them a very, very big wedding in that tiny village, and they called everybody in the village to attend that wedding. So that was the most touching story, for example, in our film.
So have the Chinese wives been back to Africa with their husbands?
Yes, a lot of the Chinese wives do go to Africa. However, in Yusuf's case, the mother made Yusuf promise that they would live in China forever. Because she only has that daughter, so she doesn't want her daughter to go away. So she made him promise that they would live there.
Yeah.
However, there is still a huge population of Chinese and African intermarriages who also end up going back to different African countries and living there.
All right, cool. Another thing I think most of the audience wouldn't understand is like there are two special, very, very Chinese things in the movie. One of it is the Yiwu, like small items. It's kind of like a lot of stalls kind of thing. And the other thing is the association of commerce.
Yeah.
Can you just introduce that? Like, why did you pick that kind of thing into your documentary?
So Yiwu is a very interesting place, and the reason why we chose to make the film about the African community in Yiwu is because Yiwu is a business city. I'm sure a lot of you haven't heard of it. Perhaps most of the cities you hear about are Shanghai or Beijing, right? Yeah. However, Yiwu is about 4 hours away from Shanghai, and it is a commercial center. So if you're a businessman, of course you know Yiwu because you get all of these small commodities from Yiwu. Yiwu has a huge market. We've seen pictures of it. That market has 40,000 stalls, 40,000 shops. So I'll give you a statistic that would give you an idea of how big that market is. Statistics say that if you spend only 3 minutes in each shop in this market, it would take you 3 years of walking night and day to go through it all. That's how large it is. And it sells a lot of very different and variable things. You can find almost everything there. So a lot of businessmen from all around the world come to Yiwu in order to do business there. And a lot of young African people, they came to China. They learned Chinese. And they make a living or they make a business through helping these businessmen navigate this city and navigate this market. So that's one reason. So Yiwu hosts the second largest African community in China, which is estimated at about 30,000 people. 30,000 people living in Yiwu and settled there. Now, let alone the people who come every year and go. And as for the Ahmed story, the Sudanese merchant who registered the Yiwu Association, China is very different. China has very strict rules with regard to registering international associations. So if you have an NGO, it's very difficult for you to register it in China. It's almost impossible. So in order for them to have a community association as the Sudanese Commercial Community Association, it was almost impossible for them to get it registered to become a legal entity that they can do a lot of activities through. So Ahmed really went through a lot. He chased this thing for about 5 years in order to get his association registered. So it kind of feels like a miracle. And like he said, his association was the first international association or merchants association to be registered in the city of Yiwu.
Yeah. So you've been in China for like 12 years, right?
Yes.
Do you think, are there any like changes, like in terms of how Chinese people treat Africans or like how they think?
No, to be honest, no. The reason why I actually, instead of joining big international companies or big international organizations after graduation, I chose to join a university and join a research institute that researches China-Africa relations. The reason why is because throughout these years that I've been living in China, there's one constant thing that hasn't changed, which is the understanding of the general Chinese population about Africa and African people and African cultures really can't measure up to the level of them opening up to the international community. So there's a gap in knowledge. When you say to someone, I'm from Somalia, the first thing that comes to their head is pirates. And they actually say that.
Yeah.
When you say, I'm from Somalia, the next thing they say, oh, haidao, which means pirates.
I know.
And if you tell them Somalia is in South America, they will say, oh, really? Oh, I didn't know. So the lack of knowledge is actually quite surprising to the level of opening up. So this is something that hasn't changed. However, the country is developing quite faster than you could imagine. The Yiwu, the first time I went there was in January 2006. Half of the city, right now, half of it was just fields, rice fields. In 10 years, we've got high-rise buildings and all of these things that you just saw. So the pace of development and changing is very, very fast in China. And if you're away from your city for 1 year, you come back, it would be difficult for you to recognize the city. And that's how fast it's changing. And people are also changing. My friends in university used to tell me that growing up, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and when I was 10 years old, we had color TV and we watched everything, right? My friends who are my age, when they were 10 years old, they didn't have color TV. They didn't have color TV. That's how poor China was. But right now, in Yiwu, this city, which is only 1,000 square kilometers big, has the largest number of luxury cars in China. So you're driving down and all you see are Bentleys and all of these Lamborghinis and huge extra driving cars. So
there's one thing I want to say is like, yeah, I totally understand Chinese people are a little bit like ignorant on African literature, African like everything related to Africa, but there is a university in Beijing called Beijing Foreign Study University, and last year they have established the first like Somali faculty, and they have like invited 3 or 4 teachers from Somalia, and they came to China to teach the students the language.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a pretty cool thing for me. So, how it's like to work with Chinese people?
oh my God, it's really difficult to work with Chinese people. Not difficult in the sense that it's hard for us to understand each other. No, I think I'm more Chinese than Somali right now. No. The difficulty is keeping up with them. So me and my colleague, just an example, Zhang Yong, who is the co-director of this film, Zhang Yong comes into the office 7 a.m. He doesn't leave until 10. And he's busy throughout the day. He maybe takes a 1-hour break during lunch, another hour break during dinner at 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock p.m. And he works 7 days a week. And he expects the same of me. So in the past 2 years, I haven't had a weekend. And I literally work every day from 7 till sometimes 10, 11 p.m. And even after I go home, there's more work I need to do. So I sleep less, I eat less, I exercise less, because the pace of work is just like that. And our institute is just busy. There's no concept of today's a holiday. There's no concept of today's a Sunday, or there's no concept of I'm a girl and I need to wash my clothes. That concept doesn't exist. So if there's work to do, you have to go and do it. So just keeping up with the pace of work and how people move is just very difficult, especially for us who, you know, my mother calls me and she calls in the afternoon and I say, Hoy wan shaqeynaya, can I call you back? She calls again 5 hours later and I Hoy wili mandamay, she calls again before I'm sleeping and I'm like, Hoy, I'm so tired and I have to wake up early tomorrow. Can I call you tomorrow? So the day just goes that way.
All right. Like, how many years did it take in total to shoot this?
So we began filming in May 2016. That the first shot that was taken was actually the first story, which is mine. I was the first character to be filmed, which was my graduation ceremony. It was in May 2016, and we only shot the last shot in September 2017. So right now we haven't really released the film yet, but we've screened versions of it in the Zanzibar International Film Festival, and it was also chosen as the opening film for the Lusaka International Film Festival. We've also premiered in China, and inshallah ta'ala we're hoping that it will continue to have a good response all over.
There are like really unforgettable obstacles you've met during the time.
My God, yes. So this film, like I said, we're not filmmakers. We're university lecturers and researchers. So the film was funded by the university, by our research institute. So you can imagine making a film like this, and you have to follow the lives of over 20 people. That means what? That means today one character will say, my son is sick and in the hospital. So you say, okay, I'm coming. You take the car, you take the crew, and you go and you film. And you've been through that throughout 2 years. So the budget that we need and the budget that we had a great gap in between. This is one thing. Number two, all of the equipment that we use, the cameras, the microphones, and everything, we had to buy them ourselves. And the Chinese financial system in the universities is kind of very complicated. Mm-hmm. So that means, yes, that means that you have to, first of all, buy everything yourself. And then you bring the receipts, and then you go through the process of reimbursing the money from the university, which takes a very long time. So basically we had to put in our own money, first of all, to buy all of this equipment, and we ran the risk of actually our receipts not being accepted sometimes.
I know.
So it was, financial side of it was difficult. And the second thing is, most of our crew were students from our university and colleagues. And with students, they would work with you today and tomorrow, but maybe the third day they'd be tired and exhausted from this kind of work. And they'd think, I don't want to do this anymore. And you need to find someone new and train them again. So this was another obstacle. And the third most important obstacle is the politics in China. Mm-hmm. Politics in China doesn't allow us as filmmakers to show anything related to religion or anything related to
Muslim.
Yes, yeah. So there's something very special about Yiwu that I actually like, which is when it's Eid. You know what happens is the city government dedicates the entire road that goes to the mosque. We have a very big mosque. And they don't allow anybody who's not Muslim to drive through there during the whole day, especially before going to the prayers, in order not to cause, zahmat or congestion in the street. We wanted to film that. We wanted to show that. We wanted to show how even the city is adapting to the people living in there. But we couldn't. So that's just an example. So navigating through the politics and trying to still show and tell the story the way you want to tell it while still being politically correct is also another difficulty.
Yeah, but personally, I still hope it is not only the negative things you've seen in the film.
Yes.
Yeah, and I still personally invite all of you one day to come to China.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great things in this country. Yeah, now and I will give the platform to the audience, and anybody want to ask something about the film, you could just shoot.
So we've heard a lot about the Sudanese community and the institution, the NGO that he built up. Could you tell us a bit more about the Somali community in Yiwu?
All right, thank you. The Somali community generally in China isn't that large. There's an estimated about 5,000 Somali students right now studying in China, and a little over 200 businessmen living across China. In the city of Yiwu, there aren't that many students, but there are a lot of businessmen, about over 100 established businesses doing very different things. There's actually a Somali businessman who owns a factory that produces underwear, men's underwear, and he sells it to the Chinese market. I really wanted to film his story, but he was skeptical about filmmaking, so we didn't. So the Somali community in Yiwu, for one thing, we're not really a community. Like, for example, the Sudanese community, they come together, they have an association, they do everything together, but we are divided. And it's a sad thing. But yeah, basically it's just two different types. It's either students or businessmen.
Thank you very much. My question is about the transnational and the Chinese community or as a country. When we hear about China, we feel they're so distant from us, and talking about interactions and welcoming other communities. How much is it about the ignorance about the African community, or is it that they are predominantly unwelcoming, like the story of Yusuf when his fiance's parents said no, he said, give me time to show you about my life, and then later on when they learned about him, they welcomed him. Is it to do with them not welcoming, or is it, like you said, they have no idea about what Africa is? Just to add to this point, it's not a question, but just a comment. The Chinese ambassador to Somali speaks very good Somali, and I was told he has learned the Somali language. Yeah, Giljire Warsame, yeah, in in the early days in the Somali National University, just for your information.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just to correct you, that ambassador is no longer the ambassador. Right now we have a new ambassador in Somalia, and he doesn't speak Somali. But I think the case is just general ignorance about the outside world. China is open, but it's also kind of closed in a way. Yeah? It's kind of open to the world, but it's still closed in a way that people still don't really have that much access to the transnational community and not transnational cultures. This is one thing. The other thing is, although China has 54 different ethnicities and minorities, however, the dominating culture is the Han culture, which is about over 90%.
Yeah, I am actually a minority myself, but
You're a
I'm
minority.
pretty Han, yeah.
Yeah, but she's already Hananized, right? Yeah. So the Han ethnicity kind of constitutes about 90% of the country, which means it's a monolithic culture, which means everybody kind of, has the same pace of thought and culture and life. So for them to accept something foreign or something different is very difficult, extremely difficult. So it's not just the fact that it's African, it's actually the fact that it's foreign, it's different, and their ignorance towards it. That's what makes it difficult. But it's changing, of course, right now. Yes.
ayaa horta wadnaha cadeeyay bal in yaro Soomaaliya aan dhex dhigo ay say wallahi raaliha laga ahaado waa tano shayna maanta waa kano adduunkii uu soo farabaxay waxaan jeclaan barnaamijkiisa ma ku jirtaa Soomaaliya afka lagu hadlo iminka waa af Ingiriisiga u badan inuu ka dhigo kiis afkiis maxay tahay afka labaad shiina inuu noqdo oo geed walba oo Soomaaliya shan shiha laga yidhaaho anigu waxaan tagay maxay ahayd 1987 dalka Shiinaha waxaad barataaba wixii kale ka dan hees Shiina ah ayaan meel isla soo taagay Zainab iga kaligeed baa shawniga wabinda
Of course, China is a very big country of 1.3 billions, 1.2 billions on many different regions with different subcultures. I read this last couple of years a lot of articles in South China Morning Post, which is a paper from Hong Kong. And of course, it's talking quite a lot about Djibouti base, about the Ethiopian electrical first railway in Africa, on all those big mega projects in Africa. And it looks like very good journalism done by a very good paper. And that paper is from Hong Kong. Also, I've been quite used to see a lot of Chinese in London, majority of tourists maybe. In France as well, you see quite a lot of students from China, in Djibouti, in Ethiopia, in Africa, everywhere these days. So is there a kind of cosmopolitan elite in some big cities like Shanghai, Shenzhen, or Hong Kong, which is very open to the world and which got quite liberal idea that they should promote human rights or openness to others, rights of minorities, and all those other democratic or liberal values. Thank you very much.
You would find areas like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Shanghai. These places are the most cosmopolitan and the first areas to open up to the rest of the world and open FDI, foreign direct investment, and with such open up into a culture, a foreign culture or a cosmopolitan culture. So these areas you would see. If you're in Shanghai, you wouldn't tell the difference. You would think that you're in France or you're in New York. You wouldn't tell that you're in China, actually. The amount of people walking down the street, you see all different colors of people, just like London. And also the culture there, the business culture there, the living there. People are a lot more open-minded and they're a lot more accommodating, yeah? So, but as you go in, because of development being in stages, as you go in throughout the city and you go to the east or to the western side of it or the inlands or the middle side of the country, you would see that it's yet to get to where you'd like it to be. So like you said, China is a huge country with a huge population, and we shouldn't just put one label on it, because I think it would be unfair. The same way that it's unfair for the whole world to just Somalia by just one region, yeah? So I hope that answers your question.
Well, actually, I am one of the students, like the university I just mentioned, and they just send Chinese students abroad to learn the rarely spoken languages, such as a lot of African languages, and they hope us to learn the language well, to be an expert on that, and one day I could go back to China and to teach the languages. So now I'm doing, once I get into the language and I get into the culture, now I'm really, really interested in Somali poetry and the modern Somali women poets. So I'm doing their work, and I hope once I go back, Chinese people will be less ignorant. At least they know there are poetry in Somali language, and Somali, there are a rich culture in Somalia, not just pirates. Thank you. And thanks again, Hodan, for shooting such an incredible movie and share it with us today. For those who have further questions, you could discuss during the break, right?
Yes, one last thing. Inshallah ta'ala, if you want to follow up on the film and when it's released and how it's released, you can go onto our website, Africans in Yiwu, Africans in EYIWU. Inshallah ta'ala, all the latest news will be posted on that. And on a very last note, I would like to thank everybody who made it here. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. Hopefully you will continue to watch and criticize the film, inshallah, when it's released. And thank you very much.